All right, today we're going to talk a little bit about setting boundaries. But this is going to be a little bit different because I know there's a lot of discussion out there about, oh, like you need to learn how to set boundaries. Like I need to set boundaries. Everyone's like, set boundaries with your boss, like set boundaries, right? Like, and psychiatrists or clinicians like me, and we'll get to this, are like, here's how you set boundaries. Like, because we have studied this, we are the experts. The problem is that a lot of people who struggle to set boundaries don't struggle because it's hard to set boundaries. A lot of the reason that it's hard to set boundaries is because the person that you're setting boundaries with doesn't give a crap about your boundaries.
I want to take a moment to thank our HG coaches. I've taught at a lot of different places and worked with a lot of different people. And honestly, our coaches are some of the best people I've ever worked with. HG coaches have helped over 10,000 people find purpose, direction, and improve their mental health. After about 20 weeks of coaching, the average client experiences a 58% improvement in sense of purpose in life, a 45% improvement in feelings of anxiety, and even a 35% reduction in feelings of despair. And this isn't just me saying this. At this point, we've done this for 3 years, run 6 research studies, and even presented our findings at the American Psychiatric Association National Conference. Over 100,000 sessions later, I can confidently say this works. So if you're interested in checking out HE coaching for yourself, go to HealthyGamerGG/coaching to learn more.
How do you set a boundary with like a parent when you live at home? How do you set a boundary with someone for whom you're like financially beholden to? And so that's what's really challenging. And I sort of learned this kind of the hard way. So I was doing a consulting gig and someone kind of like asked me a question. I was giving a talk on boundary setting, and as a psychiatrist, right? Like so trained at Harvard Medical School and all this good stuff. And then this person was like, yeah, I don't think that's going to work with my family. And I was like, no, it'll work. And this person was like, I don't think you know my grandmother. Like this would never work with her. And so I was like, no, it'll really work. And we didn't really get much resolution there. And I ended up talking to that person afterward. And I talked to a lot of other people. And I started asking people that I was working with, like, hey, what do you think about this boundary setting stuff? Like, do you think it would work for you or not work for you? And what I found was essentially one big thing, which is that boundary setting works really well when you're in a position of power. Just to give you all an example, like let's say I have a patient who's got a stimulant medication, like Adderall or methylphenidate or something like that. This is a stimulant medication, and they lose their medication. And they come to me and they say, Dr. K, I lost my medication, and this is where we learn how to set boundaries. Sorry, bro. You lost your medication you can get in 15 days. Tough luck. We're like, set the boundary. And if the patient gets pissed off, you can say, okay, fine, you can get pissed at me. I'm not going to refill your medication. If you never want to see me again, adios. And so it's easy, right? So this is the key thing about a lot of clinicians, and this is something we take for granted, is that when we're learning how to set boundaries, we're in a position of power. And so it's easy to set boundaries when you're in a position of power. Even when it comes to things like people with narcissistic parents. Once you're financially independent and out of the household, it's easy to, it can still be emotionally very difficult, but you don't have to see this person every day, right? You're not stuck at home. A lot of what I'm kind of getting this from, I'm getting this information from a couple of different places that's a little bit unusual. The first place is that I worked with a lot of narcissists in my practice. So I did a lot of addiction psychiatry. I worked with a lot of like executives and like people who are very successful. So a lot of them are like pretty narcissistic. And even in that situation, there was kind of a power dynamic, but like it was somewhat there. But what I really am sort of basing this on is not the boundaries I set with them, but I paid attention to people in their lives who were able to successfully set boundaries to them. The other kind of perspective that I have here, I know this sounds kind of different, but is honestly like a coaching perspective. So just to give you all an example. So as a clinician, I'm going to teach people how to set boundaries and work with narcissists and things like that. But if you look at the field of coaching, these are people who, hey, yeah, my boss is an absolute narcissist. They control my schedule. They control my pay. How do I successfully work with this person? So let's start by understanding how to set these boundaries. And if we want to understand that, let's understand a little bit about narcissists, okay? Because usually the people that you're going to have difficulty with is people who are quite narcissistic. So there are 2 things to understand about narcissists. The first is that they require other people to build their self-esteem. And they have particular emotional needs that they need to be met. So a narcissist doesn't feel good about themselves on their own, which means they need other people to feel good about them. Now, this becomes a huge problem if a narcissist is in a position of power over you, right? Because now what they can do is if you don't fulfill their emotional needs and if you don't give them respect, they're going to punish you. They can punish you emotionally, they can punish you financially, they can punish you in all kinds of ways, especially if it's something like a parent. So if someone calls you and is like, okay, hey, like I really need your help, like let's say it's your best friend, or let's say it's your partner. and they call you and they say, oh, I need you. I'm suicidal. Please drop everything you're doing and come and rescue me. And you may say to yourself, how is this an unfair power dynamic? Because we're both we're in a relationship with, like, they're my partner, I'm their partner, we're on equal footing. And then if you say no, they're like, oh my God, I'm going to kill myself. You don't love me. Absolutely a power dynamic because they're manipulating you emotionally. And then you cave and you run over there because you don't want them to kill themselves. You love them. So they're bludgeoning you with guilt. So that's absolutely a power dynamic. Okay. Other situations include things like, parents calling. Hey, so are you coming home for Christmas? When are you coming home from Christmas? How much time are you going to spend with me? How much time are you going to spend at your dad's place? Like, what's going on there? So, like, people will really be looking to you to fulfill their emotional needs, and they really want something from you. And the problem with narcissists is if you don't give them what they want, they punish you for it, okay? So here are a couple of tips that honestly work really well. It's sort of boundary setting and managing things with narcissists. Don't lay a boundary. Don't notify someone of a boundary when they need something from you, okay? So if someone is calling you and saying, hey, I need you to drop everything you're doing because I am suffering right now, or a boss calls you and says, hey, everything is on fire, I need you to drop what you're doing and fix this thing. Trying to set a boundary with them will cause them to escalate. They're like, bro, do you not understand what I'm saying? You need to do this, otherwise you're not going to have a job, otherwise I'm going to kill myself, otherwise this. So when their needs acutely need to be met, it's a terrible time to lay a boundary. So what you want to do is lay the boundary well in advance. Hey, boss, by the way, just FYI, I'm going to be camping this weekend, and so I won't be available on cell phone use or things like that. You mentioned this on Wednesday. Anything that I need to take care of on Thursday or Friday, ideally you want to send it to them in writing or something like that. And in the case of something like a parent or, a friend who needs your help or something like that, if they call you all the time and they're kind of emotionally dumping, you can say, hey, by the way, I've got a big test coming up on Monday. I may not be as available to you over the weekend. So let them know well in advance. The second thing to do is when they ignore your boundary because that's what they're going to do, what you want to do is like keep that boundary firm, but then never blame them for the problem. So for example, if someone calls you for emotional support and you're like, hey, like, I don't have time for you right now. I have a test on Monday. I cannot afford to listen to you. I told you on Wednesday that I have a test on Monday and you didn't listen. And now you're calling for me for emotional support. I told you so. They're absolutely going to escalate. Because what are you doing in that moment? You're making them feel worse about themselves. You did tell them so. You gave them plenty of warning. And that makes them feel more idiotic. And the more idiotic they feel, the worse they feel, the more they will escalate and the more they will try to manipulate you. So instead what you do, don't blame them. Cite in some way your own shortcoming. And you can say, hey, I'm so sorry. This sounds so important. It sounds like you're really struggling right now. I cannot focus my mind. I've been studying all day long. This sounds so incredibly important, but my mind is just not hearing what you're saying. It really sounds like you need my help right now, and I really want to help you. I'm so sorry. I'm just not able to right now. I wish I could magically do something that would make me be able to do a better job at listening. My mind is jelly. Can we try to talk about this tomorrow morning? So what you want to do is lay that boundary and then cite your own shortcoming in some way. You don't need to belabor it. You don't need to justify it very much. You want to just say it briefly. Hey, you deserve more than what I can offer. Okay, that's the kind of message that you want to send. And here's the third really important thing. You need to give them an alternative to getting their needs met. You can't just say no. You have to give them a second option. Because remember, the narcissist wants to get their needs met. And so you are saying, absolutely, you can absolutely get your needs met, but we're going to do it tomorrow. We're not going to do it right now. And eventually what you want to do is almost, I know it sounds kind of weird, but almost manipulate them into preferring the second thing over the first. You sort of give them a choice where I can do a crappy job of validating you right now, or I can do a great job of validating you tomorrow morning. Which one do you want? And even if it comes to something like a boss who's like, hey, I need you to come in on Saturday. Like, hey, I'm sorry, I'm far away. I can't come in right now, but I'm happy to try to come in. I'll check in with you on Sunday afternoon, the second I get back to internet. And this is where you're saying, well, but aren't you just appeasing them? Aren't you just kicking the bucket? What you're actually doing is laying a boundary on them. And if you're in an unfavorable power dynamic, you can't draw a line in the sand that they're going to respect. So you have to sort of give them another option that is better for you where they can still get their emotional needs met. So I've seen this a lot, especially with people like, kids who are living with parents, where the parent is like, I need you to drop everything that you're doing right now. If you really can't control it, that's totally fine. But sometimes when parents need you emotionally or calling you like, oh man, like I'm struggling right now. Like these are parents who will, be infantilized themselves and their child takes the role of the parent. So now you've got a child who's providing emotional support for their parents. And how do you set a boundary on that person? So you have to give them an alternative that's kind of easier for you. And that's the boundary that you really have to hold as best as you can. And you can say, hey, I'll be available. I'll call you first thing tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. So I know it sounds kind of weird, but if you're in an unfavorable power dynamic situation, there are a couple of key things that you have to remember. The first is that if they can bludgeon you, they will. So what you want to do as best as you can is try to avoid that by letting them know in advance. And when the issue comes around, you remind them of the boundary, but don't blame them. Blaming them will escalate everything and they will crush you. So you can say, hey, this is a shortcoming on my part. I'm so sorry. And then what you want to do is give them an alternative to get their emotional needs met. Over time, what they'll discover is, okay, that's fine. Like, because tomorrow morning they called at 9 a.m. When you call tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., what do you think is going to happen? You think they're going to talk to you for an hour? 50% chance they're going to be like, no, I'm totally fine. And they're kind of upset. And then they can't really be that mad at you, which is exactly what you want. But they've sort of learned, I'm barking up the wrong tree here. And if you do that a couple of times, you'll sort of learn that, okay, I'm not going to get what I need out of this person. I need to go somewhere else to get my emotional needs met. And that's actually exactly what you want, because that means that they're going to stop calling you. So be super careful about this stuff. I know it's kind of shady, but honestly, this is the kind of stuff that is not something that I learned as a therapist, because as a therapist, this is the biggest problem, is that sometimes people who will give advice about how to set boundaries have all the power. And it's easy to, I can teach you how to set boundaries with your child. That's easy. I can set boundaries with my child however I want because I'm the one with all the power. The problem is, and we get this request so much, hey, Dr. K, we've heard your advice about boundary setting, but what do I do if I'm a kid who's alone at home and I'm depending on my parents for money? You can still use this technique, right? So this is something that, oddly enough, I discovered through all of my coaching relationships, which is how do you handle a narcissistic boss? Secondly, when they try to violate your boundary, don't blame them for it. That's just going to make things worse. Give them an alternative that works a little bit better on your timeline. And the cool thing is you can continue to shift that, right? Hey, I'm so sorry that your things are falling apart right now. Don't say anything like, I'm at dinner with my friends, I can't talk. Because that's going to emphasize that someone else is more important than them, right? You can't tell your boss, hey, I'm sorry, I can't drop everything that I'm doing and come to work right now. I am getting married. And then your boss is going to be like, bitch, you better leave your spouse at the altar and get your ass down here because our toilet is clogged. Instead, what you have to do is just own it and say, hey, I'm so sorry I'm not able to do that right now. I feel terrible about it. Can I call you first thing tomorrow? And push a little bit, push. But this is a really effective technique. And the key thing here is that if you're in a situation where you don't have a power in the relationship, you have to still meet their need because otherwise they'll bludgeon you. But you can still set a boundary and over time, push it out a little bit. And even though you're responsible for meeting their needs, you can meet their needs on your terms. And that's ultimately how you set boundaries with people who are narcissistic or have power dynamics.